In the misty village of St. Mary's Mead, a genius composer lies dead in his locked conservatory, poisoned, his masterpiece the Phantom Requiem stolen. A fiery conductor, a vengeful rival, a devoted student, each harbors secrets, each a suspect. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of envy and deceit. A hidden key, a trace of cyanide, a missing score. Who orchestrated this perfect crime? In a race against lies, one truth will sing. A rival's ambition turned deadly, stealing not just a score, but a life. Chapter 1. The Silent Conservatory. The mist hung low over St. Mary's Mead, cloaking the village in a shroud of autumnal melancholy. The cobbled lanes lined with ivy-clad cottages seemed to whisper secrets as the first light of dawn crept through the hills. At the edge of the village stood Harrow Hall, a sprawling Georgian manor, its stone facade softened by time and moss. Within its grounds, a glass-domed conservatory gleamed like a jewel, home to Sir Reginald Harrow, the celebrated composer whose music had once stirred the hearts of London's elite. It was here, in this sanctuary of flora and melody, that tragedy struck with the chill of an October morning. Hercule Poirot, on a rare visit to his friend Captain Hastings, had been enjoying a quiet breakfast at Rose Cottage when the news arrived. The village postmistress, Mrs. Tuttle, burst in, her cheeks flushed and her bonnet askew. "Monsieur Poirot, oh, it's dreadful," she gasped. "Sir Reginald, dead. Found this morning in his conservatory and the door locked tight." Hastings, buttering his toast, froze mid-motion, his honest face creasing with concern. Poirot, his small, fastidious frame immaculate in a pinstriped suit, set down his coffee cup with deliberate calm. "Dead, you say? And locked? Most curious. We must go at once. Hastings." The walk to Harrow Hall was brisk, the air sharp with the scent of damp leaves. Poirot's polished shoes clicked on the path, his green eyes darting over the landscape as if the very hedgerows might yield a clue. Hastings, striding beside him, muttered, "Poor old Harrow." His symphonies were the talk of the season. Who'd want to harm him? Poirot's mustache twitched. "Who, mon ami?" "That is the question, but first let us observe the scene. The little gray cells, they demand order and precision." The conservatory, a marvel of glass and iron, stood apart from the main house, surrounded by a garden of fading roses. Inside, exotic plants, ferns, orchids, and a towering palm created a lush, almost tropical atmosphere. At the center, dominating the space, was a grand piano, its ebony surface polished to a mirror's sheen. And there, slumped over the keys, lay Sir Reginald Harrow, his silver hair disheveled, his hands clutching a single sheet of music. The air held a faint, acrid scent like bitter almonds, and a shattered teacup lay scattered on the tiled floor nearby. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting every detail. The locked door, its brass key still in place, the sealed windows, their latches undisturbed, the music stand, bare save for a few scattered pencils. The single sheet in Sir Reginald's grasp bore the title, "The Phantom Requiem," but the rest of the score, rumored to be his greatest work, was nowhere to be found. "A masterpiece vanished," Poirot murmured, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the piano. "And a man dead in a room locked from within. This, Hastings, is no ordinary crime." Dr. Grayson, a stout man with a walrus mustache, arrived puffing from the village. After a brief examination, he straightened, his face grim. "Poison, I'd wager." Cyanide most likely from that smell. Quick but not painless. He's been dead since last night, I'd say. Poirot nodded, his eyes lingering on the teacup fragments. And this cup, Doctor? Was it his habit to take tea here? Dr. Grayson shrugged. Aye, he often did, but plain, no sugar. Odd to see syrup in the residue. Poirot crouched, inspecting the shards. A sticky film clung to them, faintly sweet. Syrup, you say? Most interesting. He rose, his movements precise, and turned to the door. The lock was a simple bolt, unmarred by scratches or force. The windows, too, showed no signs of tampering. Yet something in the room felt amiss. A whisper of disorder beneath the pristine surface. Poirot's fingers brushed a faint scratch on the tiled floor near the piano, barely visible. The room, it speaks, he said softly, but its voice is faint. Hastings, pacing nervously, gestured to the sheet music. That requiem, they say it was to premiere in London next month. Worth a fortune, I'd bet. Could someone have killed him for it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. A fortune, yes, but in fame or in coin. We must learn who stood to gain from Sir Reginald's silence, and from the theft of his music. As the village constable arrived to secure the scene, Poirot stepped outside, the mist curling around him like a living thing. He glanced back at the conservatory, its glass panes reflecting the gray sky. This locked room, Hastings, it is not a puzzle of mechanics but of the heart. Someone wished Sir Reginald dead and his requiem gone. We shall find them, mon ami, with method and with order. Chapter 2. The Circle of Suspects. The drawing room of Harrow Hall was a study in faded grandeur, its high ceilings adorned with plasterwork that spoke of a bygone era, its heavy velvet curtains muffling the October drizzle pattering against the tall windows. The air was thick with the scent of old books and beeswax polish, and a fire crackled in the grate, casting flickering shadows across the faces of those gathered. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, fastidious figure commanding attention despite his unassuming stature. His black patent shoes gleamed, his pinstriped suit was immaculate, and his mustache, waxed to perfection, quivered slightly as he surveyed the assembly. Captain Hastings, seated on a plush armchair, fidgeted with his cufflinks, his honest brow furrowed with unease. The death of Sir Reginald Harrow, found poisoned in his locked conservatory, had shaken the quiet village of St. Mary's Mead, and now Poirot was determined to unravel the threads of this perplexing tragedy. The household had been summoned, and they sat in a tense semicircle, their eyes darting between Poirot and one another. The room held a motley cast. Maestro Victor Langston, the fiery conductor of Sir Reginald's orchestra, whose silver mane and hawk-like features gave him the air of a displaced monarch. Clara Vane, a rival composer, her sharp cheekbones and colder gaze betraying a simmering resentment. And young Edmund Blake, Sir Reginald's student, whose pale, boyish face was etched with grief. Beside them sat Mrs. Agnes Poole, the housekeeper, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and Thomas Reed, the groundskeeper, whose weathered face betrayed little emotion. A handful of lesser staff, maids and a cook, hovered at the edges, their presence more formality than necessity. Poirot cleared his throat, a delicate sound that nonetheless silenced the room. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice precise, tinged with his characteristic Belgian lilt. We are gathered to discuss a matter most grave. The death of Sir Reginald Harrow, A man of genius found dead in his conservatory, poisoned with his masterpiece, the Phantom Requiem, stolen. The door was locked, the key within, yet a crime has been committed. Hercule Poirot does not believe in impossibilities. There is always a solution, and it lies within the truth you will now share. Hastings leaned forward, whispering, "Look at Langston, Poirot. That temper of his, he and Sir Reginald were at odds, weren't they?" Poirot's green eyes flicked toward the conductor, but he said nothing, merely inclining his head as if to invite the room to speak. Victor Langston rose first, his posture rigid, his voice resonant with the authority of a man accustomed to commanding orchestras. "This is absurd," he declared, his hands slicing the air. "I had no reason to harm Reginald. We were colleagues, collaborators. Yes, we disagreed. His insistence on altering the Requiem's tempo was madness. But murder? Preposterous." His dark eyes flashed, and Poirot noted the slight tremor in his fingers, the way they clutched the arm of his chair. "Disagreements, Monsieur Langston, they can fester," Poirot said smoothly. "Tell me, where were you last night when Sir Reginald met his end?" Langston's jaw tightened. "In London, rehearsing with the Philharmonic. We were preparing for the Requiem's premiere. I was there until late. Ask anyone in the orchestra." His tone was defiant, but Poirot's gaze lingered on the conductor's coat draped over a chair. A faint stain, barely visible, marred the cuff, indigo, the hue of Sir Reginald's manuscript ink. "Most interesting," Poirot murmured, stepping closer to examine the coat without touching it. "And this stain, monsieur?" "It is not the mark of a man who merely conducts." Langston's face reddened, but he waved a dismissive hand. "I visited Reginald 3 days ago. We discussed the score. Some ink must have rubbed off. It means nothing." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Nothing, monsieur? In a case of murder, nothing is nothing." He turned to Clara Vanes, who sat with her arms crossed, her dark hair pulled tightly back, accentuating the angular beauty of her face. "Madame Vane, you were no friend to Sir Reginald, n'est-ce pas?" "Your rivalry, it is well known." Clara's lips curved into a thin, mirthless smile. "Rivalry? That's a polite word for it. Reginald Harrow was a thief of opportunity. My patrons, my commissions, he took them all, flaunting his so-called genius. His Requiem was to be his crowning glory, but I'd have surpassed it with my own work." Her voice was sharp, like the snap of a violin string, and her gray eyes met Poirot's without flinching. "And where were you, madam, when Sir Reginald drank his fatal tea?" Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. "Alone in my cottage composing," she replied coolly. "I work best at night. No one can vouch for me, but then I don't need an alibi. I had no reason to kill him. His failure would have been humiliation enough." Her words were laced with venom, and Poirot noted the way her fingers tightened around the armrest, betraying a tension her face concealed. Hastings whispered again, "She's got a nerve, Poirot." Ruthless, that one. Poirot nodded slightly, his eyes never leaving Clara. "A composer's passion, madame, it can be a dangerous thing. And the Requiem, did you not covet its brilliance?" Clara laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Covet? I create my own brilliance, Monsieur Poirot. I don't need to steal." Yet her laughter faltered, and Poirot's keen senses detected a flicker of unease in her gaze. He turned next to Edmund Blake, the young student who sat hunched, his hands twisting in his lap. His brown eyes were red-rimmed, his fair hair disheveled as if he had not slept. Monsieur Blake, Poirot said gently. You were close to Sir Reginald, oui? His protégé, his heir, perhaps, in both music and fortune. Tell me of your evening. Edmund's voice trembled as he spoke. I was at the Red Lion, the village pub, with friends. Tom Carver, the blacksmith's son, and Mary Ellis, the vicar's daughter. We were there till midnight. I swear it, his sincerity was palpable, but Poirot's gaze lingered on the boy's nervous hands. Sir Reginald, he was like a father to me. His music, it was everything. That score, the Requiem, whoever took it, they took his soul. Poirot's expression softened, but his mind was sharp. And yet, monsieur, there are whispers of a will, a change in Sir Reginald's intentions. Did he speak of this to you? Edmund's face paled and he shook his head vigorously. No, no. He never mentioned anything like that. He trusted me. Mrs. Poole, the housekeeper, spoke up, her voice steady but low. Begging your pardon, sir, but Sir Reginald did mention a new will just last week. Said he was thinking of leaving something to the village church for a music school. Young Master Edmund was there when he said it. Edmund's eyes widened and he stammered, I didn't think he meant it. He was always talking of plans. Poirot's mustache twitched. A motive, perhaps, for one who expected to inherit. But let us not rush, mes amis. The truth, it reveals itself in time. He turned to Thomas Reed, the groundskeeper, a man of few words whose weathered hands rested calmly on his knees. Monsieur Reed, you tend the gardens, the conservatory. Did you see anything unusual last night? Reed's voice was gruff. I was in my shed sharpening tools till about 10. Saw nothing, heard nothing. The conservatory's lights were on as usual. Sir Reginald often worked late. But I didn't go near. His simplicity was convincing. But Poirot noted the man's steady gaze, as if he were accustomed to observing without being observed. The maids and cook offered little. They had been in the kitchen preparing for the next day's meals and had seen no strangers. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind sifting through the words, the glances, the silences. Each of you, he said at last, has a connection to Sir Reginald and to his Requiem. The conductor who desired its glory, the rival who envied its promise, the student who stood to lose or gain. And yet the locked room, the poison, the missing score, these are pieces of a puzzle that do not yet fit. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. I ask you to reflect, to consider what you may have seen, what you may know. For Hercule Poirot will find the truth, and it will not remain hidden. The room was silent save for the crackle of the fire and the distant patter of rain. Langston's jaw clenched. Clara's lips tightened, and Edmund's hands stilled as if frozen by Poirot's words. Hastings, rising as the group dispersed, muttered, A fine lot of suspects, Poirot. Langston's temper, Clara's spite, Edmund's inheritance. Any of them could have done it. But that locked room. How? Poirot's smile was faint, almost secretive. The locked room, mon ami, is but a distraction. The heart of this crime lies not in the mechanics, but in the desires of those who surrounded Sir Reginald. We shall visit their worlds, the orchestra, the cottage, the pub, and the truth will emerge. As they stepped into the hall, Poirot glanced back at the drawing room, where the suspects lingered, each lost in their thoughts. The firelight danced on the walls, casting shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The phantom requiem, Poirot said softly. It is more than music. It is the key to this murder. And we shall find it, Hastings, with method and with order. The drizzle had thickened to a steady rain as they left Harrow Hall, the manor looming behind them like a silent witness. Poirot's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments, the indigo stain, the bitter almond scent, the missing score. The circle of suspects had been drawn, and within it, the truth waited, as elusive as a melody yet to be played. Chapter 3. The conductor's alibi. The rain had ceased by mid-morning, leaving St. Mary's Mead draped in a damp, silvery haze that clung to the hedgerows and softened the outlines of Harrow Hall. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the chill, walked briskly toward the village station, Captain Hastings at his side, their footsteps crunching on the gravel path. The mystery of Sir Reginald Harrow's death, poisoned in his locked conservatory, his masterpiece the Phantom Requiem stolen, had set Poirot's mind ablaze. The conductor, Maestro Victor Langston, had claimed an alibi in London, but the faint indigo stain on his coat, matching the ink of Sir Reginald's manuscript, had piqued Poirot's curiosity. "We shall test this alibi, mon ami," Poirot said, his green eyes gleaming beneath the brim of his hat. "A conductor leads the orchestra, but who leads the truth?" Hastings, clutching his umbrella, frowned. "Langston's a hothead, Poirot. Everyone knows he and Sir Reginald clashed over that requiem. But London's a fair distance. Could he really have slipped back here in time to do the deed?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Distance, Hastings, is but a matter of timetables and determination. Let us see what the Philharmonic reveals." The train to London was a rattling affair, its compartments smelling of coal smoke and leather. Poirot sat by the window, his gloved hands folded, his mind sifting through the details of the case. The locked conservatory, the cyanide-laced tea, the missing score, all pointed to a crime of precision and passion. Langston, with his commanding presence and volatile temper, was a figure of interest, but Poirot knew better than to leap to conclusions. "The heart of a man, it betrays itself in the smallest gestures," he murmured, almost to himself. At Victoria Station, the bustle of London enveloped them. Cabbies shouting, newsboys hawking papers, the air thick with the scent of soot and roasted chestnuts. Poirot hailed a taxi, directing it to the Royal Philharmonic Hall, a grand edifice of stone and gilt where Langston's orchestra rehearsed. The hall's foyer was lined with posters proclaiming the upcoming premiere of the Phantom Requiem, now cast into uncertainty by Sir Reginald's death. A young usher, recognizing Poirot's name from a recent society column, led them to the manager's office. Mr. Percival Thorne, a wiry man, with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, greeted them with a harried air. "Maestro Langston?" "Yes, he was here Monday night rehearsing until 8 o'clock, Thorne said, consulting a ledger. "The orchestra was working on Harrow's symphony number." 4, not the Requiem, Langston's orders. He left promptly after, said he had a train to catch. Poirot's eyes narrowed. 8 o'clock, Monsieur Thorne. And the train, it was to where? Thorne shrugged. "Didn't say. But he's a punctual man, always rushing off to some appointment. The musicians can confirm he was here. Try Miss Lydia Brent, the first violinist." Hastings scribbled in his notebook, muttering, 8 o'clock leaves plenty of time to get back to Saint. Mary's Mead by midnight, Poirot. The last train's at 9. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "We shall speak to Mademoiselle Brent. And then, perhaps, the truth will play a clearer note." Miss Brent, a slight woman with auburn hair and a nervous demeanor, was found tuning her violin in the rehearsal room. The vast hall echoed with the faint strains of a cellist practicing in a corner, the notes mournful and low. She looked up as Poirot approached, her bow stilling. "Maestro Langston?" "Yes, he was here Monday," she said, her voice soft but precise. "He was in a foul mood, snapped at the brass section over a tempo change. Left at 8 sharp, said he had urgent business." Poirot tilted his head. "Urgent business, mademoiselle? Did he mention Sir Reginald Harrow or the Requiem?" Lydia hesitated, her fingers tightening on her bow. "Not directly, but he's been obsessed with that score. Kept muttering about Reginald's folly and how the premiere would make or break him. I thought it odd. He's never been so rattled." Hastings leaned in. "Rattled enough to kill, do you think?" Lydia's eyes widened and she shook her head. "I can't imagine it, sir. He's passionate, but murder? Surely not." Poirot's smile was faint. "Passion, mademoiselle, it is a flame that can warm or destroy. Merci for your candor." As they left the hall, Poirot paused to examine a program pinned to a notice board. It listed Langston as the conductor for the Requiem's premiere, his name in bold beside Sir Reginald's. "Fame, Hastings," Poirot said, tapping the paper. "It is a powerful motive. If Langston believed the Requiem would eclipse him, or if he sought to control its legacy." He trailed off, his mind already turning to the next step. Back at Harrow Hall, Poirot requested to see Langston's coat again, now hanging in the cloakroom. The indigo stain was faint but unmistakable, a smudge on the cuff that spoke of carelessness or haste. Poirot produced a small magnifying glass, peering at the fabric. "This ink, it is the same as Sir Reginald's. Unique. Imported from Vienna, he told me once. How does it find its way to Monsieur Langston's coat?" Langston, summoned to the cloakroom, bristled at the sight of Poirot examining his garment. "I told you I visited Reginald days ago. We discussed the score over tea in the conservatory. Some ink must have spilled." His voice was sharp, but his eyes darted to the stain, and Poirot noted a bead of sweat on his brow despite the cool air. "Tea, monsieur?" Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "And yet Sir Reginald took his tea plain, without syrup. Curious then that the cup beside him held a sugary residue." Langston's face darkened, but he said nothing, his hands clenching at his sides. Hastings, watching closely, whispered, "He's hiding something, Poirot. That temper of his, it's like a kettle about to boil over." Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on Langston. "A kettle, mon ami, does not boil without heat." "We must find the source of this fire." Poirot then requested to see Langston's travel bag, left in the guest room where he occasionally stayed. The bag, a worn leather satchel, contained nothing remarkable. Sheet music, a baton, a flask of brandy. But Poirot's keen fingers brushed against a hidden pocket, revealing a single train ticket stub. "London to St. Mary's Mead, dated Monday night, 9:15 p.m. "Most interesting," Poirot said, holding the stub aloft. "You returned to the village, Monsieur Langston, on the night of the murder. Why?" Langston's face flushed crimson. I came to see Reginald to settle our differences, but he was already asleep when I arrived, so I left. I swear it." His voice cracked, and Poirot's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of a hunter closing in on his prey. "Left, monsieur? Yet you did not mention this visit before. And the conservatory, it was locked, with Sir Reginald dead inside." "Explain, if you please," Langston stammered, his composure crumbling. I knocked, but there was no answer. I assumed he was working, so I went to the inn instead. Ask the innkeeper. Poirot inclined his head. We shall, monsieur, and we shall see if your notes align with the melody of truth. As Langston stormed off, Poirot turned to Hastings. The alibi, it is not as solid as he claims. The train, the ink, the temper, these are threads, but not yet the tapestry. The innkeeper at the Red Lion, a jovial man named Mr. Cobb, confirmed Langston's late arrival on Monday around 11 p.m., but could not say where he had been prior. Looked out of sorts, he did, Cobb said, polishing a glass. Ordered a whiskey and went straight to his room. Poirot thanked him, his mind already weaving the new information into the pattern. As they walked back to Rose Cottage, the village now cloaked in twilight, Hastings said, Langston's story's got holes, Poirot. He was here, not in London, when Sir Reginald died. And that ink, damning, isn't it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Damning, perhaps, but not conclusive. The ink suggests proximity, but the poison requires cunning. We must look to the others, Madame Vine, Monsieur Blake. The conductor's alibi falters, but the score of this crime has more players. The stars were emerging above Saint Mary's Mead, their light faint against the gathering dark. Poirot paused, gazing at the sky. The truth, Hastings, it is like a melody, hidden at first, but with each note revealed, it sings. We shall hear it soon, mon ami. Chapter 4. The rival's venom. The morning sun broke through the clouds over Saint Mary's Mead, casting a pale golden light on the wet cobblestones and the ivy-clad walls of the village. Hercule Poirot, his walking stick tapping a steady rhythm, led Captain Hastings along a narrow lane toward the cottage of Clara Vane, the rival composer whose sharp tongue and sharper ambition had marked her as a suspect in Sir Reginald Harrow's murder. The locked conservatory, the cyanide-tainted tea, and the stolen phantom requiem weighed heavily on Poirot's mind, and Clara's flimsy alibi, alone composing in her cottage, demanded scrutiny. A woman of passion, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice crisp in the cool air. But passion, it can be a mask for darker intent. Hastings, adjusting his hat against the breeze, nodded. She's got the nerve for it, Poirot. The way she spoke of Sir Reginald, pure venom. And with her career in the doldrums, that requiem must have stung her pride. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Pride, mon ami, is a dangerous thing. It builds castles, but it also burns them. Let us see what Madame Vane's cottage reveals. Clara's home was a modest affair tucked at the edge of the village, its stone walls half hidden by overgrown honeysuckle. The garden was wild, untended, a stark contrast to the manicured precision of Harrow Hall. A single window glowed with lamplight, and as Poirot knocked, the door opened to reveal Clara herself. Her dark hair swept into a severe bun, her gray eyes narrowing at the sight of her visitors. She wore a black dress, simple but elegant, and her posture was as rigid as a violin string. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice cool. I expected you'd come sniffing about. What do you want? Poirot bowed slightly, his manner impeccable. Madame Vane, I seek only the truth. May we enter? The matter of Sir Reginald's death, it requires your insight. Clara hesitated, then stepped aside, gesturing them into a cramped parlor. The room was cluttered with sheet music scattered across a small writing desk, and a battered upright piano stood against one wall, its keys yellowed with age. A faint scent of lavender lingered, undercut by something sharper, chemical perhaps. Sit if you must, Clara said, perching on the edge of a chair, her hands folded tightly. I've told you my whereabouts, composing alone. What more is there? Poirot's mustache twitched as he settled into a worn armchair, his gaze sweeping the room. Much, madame. The truth, it is like a melody. It requires all the notes to be heard. You despised Sir Reginald, did you not? His success had cast a shadow over your own. Clara's lips curled into a bitter smile. Despised? That's too mild a word. He was a parasite, feeding on my patrons, my opportunities. 10 years ago, I was the name on every lip in London. Then Reginald came, with his pompous symphonies and his charm, and I was forgotten. His requiem was to be his triumph, but I'd have outdone him. My ode to solitude would have silenced his precious score. Her voice was a blade, sharp and cold, but Poirot noted the tremor in her fingers, the way her eyes flicked to the desk. An ode, madame? Most intriguing, Poirot said, rising to examine the sheet music. The pages were pristine, filled with neat, precise notation, but none bore the indigo ink of Sir Reginald's manuscript. And yet, you were alone when he died, with no one to confirm your solitude. A dangerous position, n'est-ce pas? Clara's smile tightened. Dangerous? Only if you think me a fool. I had no need to kill him. His arrogance was its own poison. Hastings, standing by the piano, cleared his throat. Arrogance doesn't lace tea with cyanide, Miss Vane. You know your chemistry, don't you? Photography, wasn't it? Clara's eyes flashed, but she answered smoothly. A hobby, Captain. Developing photographs requires chemicals, yes, but I'm no murderer. Would you like to see my darkroom? Poirot's interest quickened. Oui, madame, I would. She led them to a small annex off the parlor, a windowless room with a faint chemical tang. Shelves held bottles of developer, fixer, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. A small vial labeled potassium cyanide. Clara followed his gaze and laughed, a sound like brittle glass. For developing plates, monsieur. It's common in photography. Surely you don't think I'd be so careless as to leave evidence lying about? Poirot picked up the vial with gloved hands, holding it to the light. The label was pristine, the contents crystalline. Careless, madame? Number, but precise, perhaps. Cyanide, it is a swift killer, and Sir Reginald's tea held its bitter kiss. How do you explain this? Clara's composure wavered, her lips parting slightly. I explain nothing. It's for my work, not murder. You've no proof. Poirot set the vial down, his expression unreadable. Proof, madame, is a matter of time. Tell me, did you ever see Sir Reginald's requiem? Its pages, its ink? Clara shook her head too quickly. Never. I wouldn't touch his work. It was bloated, overrated like him. But her voice faltered, and Poirot noted the way her hands clenched as if guarding a secret. He moved to the desk, his fingers brushing a stack of manuscript paper. Beneath it, half hidden, was a single sheet, not in Clara's tidy hand, but in a looser, more florid script. He lifted it, revealing a fragment of music, the notes incomplete, but the title clear, Ode to Solitude. The ink was black, not indigo, but the paper was of the same heavy stock Sir Reginald favored. Curious, Poirot murmured. Your ode, it shares a certain quality with Sir Reginald's work. Clara snatched the sheet away, her face pale. It's mine. I've been working on it for months. You think I'd stoop to stealing his rubbish? Poirot's smile was gentle, almost pitying. Stealing, madame? Perhaps not, but envy. It can drive one to desperate acts. Did you visit Harrow Hall recently? Clara's eyes darted to the door, then back to Poirot. A week ago, we spoke, argued, if you must know. He mocked my work, said I'd never match him. I left in a fury, but alive he was. Her voice was steady now, but Poirot sensed the effort behind it. He nodded as if satisfied and turned to leave, pausing at the threshold. One last thing, madame. The Requiem. Its loss, it benefits whom? A rival, perhaps, who wishes to claim its glory? Clara's laugh was sharp. If you're suggesting I took it, you're mistaken. I create, Monsieur Poirot, not destroy. But as they stepped into the garden, Poirot's keen senses caught a faint rustle from the parlor, as if Clara had moved quickly to conceal something. He said nothing, but his mind was alight. Outside, Hastings exhaled. She's a cool one, Poirot, but that's cyanide damning, isn't it? And that sheet of music, it looked too much like Harrow's style for my liking. Poirot nodded, his walking stick tapping the path. The cyanide. It is a clue, but not yet a verdict. The music, it suggests a connection, but not theft. Not yet. Madame Vane hides something, but is it murder? We must look deeper. They walked toward the village, the church spire rising against the sky. Poirot's thoughts turned to the conservatory, the locked door, the shattered teacup. Clara's knowledge of cyanide was troubling, but her composure suggested calculation, not impulsiveness. She is a woman of control, Poirot said almost to himself, but control it can crack under pressure. We shall apply it, Hastings, and see what falls at the Red Lion. Poirot inquired about Clara's habits. The barmaid, a rosy-cheeked girl named Jenny, recalled seeing her in the village on Monday evening buying tea from the grocer. Looked out of sorts, she did, Jenny said, snapped at Mr. Giles for being slow. Not like her, usually so polished. Poirot thanked her, his mind noting the timing, early evening before Sir Reginald's death, but close enough to matter. As they returned to Rose Cottage, the village settling into dusk, Hastings said, Clara's got the means, Poirot, cyanide, and the motive, that rivalry. But how'd she get into a locked room? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The room, mon ami, is a riddle, but not the heart of this crime. The venom of Madame Vane. It is in her words, her eyes. Whether it poisoned Sir Reginald, we shall discover. For now, we turn to the student, Monsieur Blake. His devotion, it may hide its own secrets. The evening air was sharp, the stars emerging like notes on a silent score. Poirot paused, gazing at the sky. The truth, Hastings, it is like music. It waits for the right moment to be heard. And we shall hear it soon. Chapter 5. The Student's Devotion. The afternoon light filtered through the heavy clouds over St. Mary's Mead, casting a muted glow on the village's winding lanes. Hercule Poirot, his walking stick clicking against the cobblestones, led Captain Hastings toward Harrow Hall, their destination the modest attic room of Edmund Blake, Sir Reginald Harrow's young student. The mystery of the composer's death, poisoned by cyanide in a locked conservatory, his masterpiece, the Phantom Requiem, stolen, had drawn a web of suspicion around the conductor, the rival, and now the devoted protégé. Edmund's trembling hands and tearful devotion had stirred Poirot's curiosity, but the housekeeper's mention of a changed will hinted at a motive beneath the boy's grief. Devotion, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice precise as ever. It is a beautiful thing, but even the purest note can hide a discord. Hastings, adjusting his scarf against the damp chill, frowned. Edmund's just a lad, Poirot. Barely 20, and he worshipped Sir Reginald. Surely he's not the murdering type. Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes sharp beneath his hat's brim. The heart of youth, mon ami, it burns fiercely. Sometimes too fiercely. We shall see what lies behind Monsieur Blake's tears. At Harrow Hall, the housekeeper, Mrs. Agnes Poole, met them at the door, her face a mask of weary efficiency. "Master Edmund's upstairs," she said, her hands smoothing her apron. "He's been in a state since Sir Reginald's passing. Hardly eats, just sits with his books and music." She led them through the grand hall, its walls lined with portraits of stern Harrow ancestors, to a narrow staircase that spiraled to the attic. The air grew cooler as they climbed, the scent of old wood and dust replacing the polish of the lower floors. Edmund's room was small, almost monastic, with a slanted ceiling and a single dormer window overlooking the misty gardens. A narrow bed, a desk piled with sheet music, and a violin case in the corner comprised its furnishings. Edmund sat at the desk, his fair hair falling into his eyes, his thin frame hunched over a notebook. He looked up as Poirot knocked, his brown eyes red-rimmed and wary. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice catching. I didn't expect you." He rose, knocking a pencil to the floor, and Poirot noted the boy's trembling hands, the nervous dart of his gaze. "Be at ease, Monsieur Blake," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. "We seek only to understand. You were close to Sir Reginald, we? His student, his confidant. Tell me of your bond with him." Edmund swallowed, sinking back into his chair. "He was everything. My father died when I was young, and Sir Reginald took me in, taught me music, theory, life. His requiem, it was his soul, his legacy. I'd have done anything to protect him." Hastings, standing by the door, raised an eyebrow. "Anything, eh?" "That's a strong word, lad." Edmund flinched, his hands twisting together. "I didn't mean that. I was at the Red Lion that night with Tom Carver and Mary Ellis. Ask them." "I'd never hurt him." Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting the neat stack of music, the worn violin case, a single photograph on the wall, Edmund and Sir Reginald smiling beside the Conservatory's grand piano. "A fine sentiment, monsieur," Poirot said, stepping toward the desk. "And yet there is talk of a will, a change that might have left you with less than you hoped. Did Sir Reginald speak of this?" Edmund's face paled, his eyes dropping to the floor. He mentioned something a week ago. Said he wanted to fund a music school for the village through the church. I thought it was just talk. He was always dreaming up grand plans." His voice broke, and he buried his face in his hands. "I didn't care about the money. I only wanted to learn from him, to make him proud." Mrs. Poole, lingering at the door, nodded. "It's true, sir." Sir Reginald was fond of Edmund, but he was set on that school, said it would be his gift to the future. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A gift, madame, that might have diminished another's inheritance." "Most interesting." He turned back to Edmund, his tone softening. "Tell me, monsieur, did you ever handle the requiem? Its pages, its ink?" Edmund shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. "I saw it, helped him copy parts, but I never took it. It was sacred to him. Whoever stole it, they killed him twice." His grief was raw, almost palpable, but Poirot's keen senses caught a slight hesitation, a flicker of something unspoken in the boy's eyes. Poirot moved to the desk, his gloved fingers brushing a crumpled piece of paper tucked beneath a book. He unfolded it with care, revealing a letter in Sir Reginald's hand. dated a week prior. It read, "Edmund, my boy, you have talent, but the future must be shared. I intend to endow a school to teach others as I have taught you. Forgive me if this changes things." The signature was unmistakable, and Edmund's breath caught as Poirot held it up. "This, monsieur, suggests a motive. A young man expecting wealth finds his future altered." "Did this anger you?" "No!" Edmund cried, his voice rising. "I loved him. I'd never. He broke off, tears spilling down his cheeks. Hastings shifted uncomfortably, but Poirot's expression remained impassive. "Love, monsieur, it can wound as deeply as hate. Where were you truly on Monday night?" Edmund wiped his eyes, his voice steadying. "I told you, the Red Lion, with Tom and Mary. We drank, talked, played darts. I got back here after midnight, and Sir Reginald was already gone." His words were earnest, but Poirot noted the way his hands clenched, as if bracing for a blow. Leaving Edmund to his grief, Poirot and Hastings descended to the village, heading for the Red Lion to verify the alibi. The pub was a warm, smoky haven, its low beams hung with brass tankards. Mr. Cobb, the innkeeper, greeted them with a nod. "Young Edmund?" "Aye, he was here Monday night with Tom Carver and that vicar's girl, Mary. Stayed till closing near midnight. Bit quiet he was, but no trouble. Mary Ellis, fetching drinks from the bar, overheard and approached. "Edmund was with us, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but clear. "He was upset, said something about Sir Reginald changing his plans. But he didn't leave till we did." Tom Carver, a burly lad polishing glasses, nodded. "Aye, he was here. Kept checking his watch, though, like he was waiting for something." Poirot thanked them, his mind cataloging the details. "The boy's alibi, it holds. For now," he said to Hastings as they stepped outside. "But this watch-checking, it suggests a mind not at ease. And the letter, it confirms a motive, however small." Hastings frowned. "Motive, maybe, but cyanide, locked rooms? He's just a boy, Poirot, not a master criminal." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Youth, mon ami, does not preclude cunning. But I agree, the poison, the theft, it requires a certain sophistication. We must consider the others. Langston's temper, Clara's venom, they are notes in this symphony, but Edmund's devotion, it may yet play a part." They walked toward the church, where the vicar, a kindly man named Reverend Hale, confirmed Sir Reginald's plan for a music school. "He spoke of it last Sunday," Hale said, his eyes sad. "Wanted to leave a legacy for the village through Edmund's talent and others. A noble idea, but it caused tension, I fear." Poirot nodded, filing away the confirmation of the will's intent. As dusk settled over St. Mary's Mead, the village lights twinkling like stars, Poirot paused by the churchyard, gazing at the spire. "The Requiem, Hastings, it is the key. Edmund loved it, but did he love it enough to kill for it, or to protect it? The truth, it waits, but it will not wait long." His voice was soft, but his eyes burned with the fire of a mind closing in on its quarry. Chapter 6. The Locked Room Riddle. The evening draped St. Mary's Mead in a velvet hush, the village lamps casting soft pools of light on the damp cobblestones. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the October chill, stood before the glass-domed conservatory of Harrow Hall, its panes reflecting the twilight like a silent, watchful eye. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, rubbed his hands for warmth, his breath visible in the crisp air. The mystery of Sir Reginald, Harrow's death, poisoned by cyanide in this very room, locked from within with his phantom requiem stolen, had grown more intricate with each suspect's story. The conductor's faltering alibi, the rival's venomous ambition, and the student's trembling devotion had all been scrutinized, yet the enigma of the locked room remained. "It's a puzzle, Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low. "A locked door, no sign of entry. How did the killer do it?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed beneath his hat's brim, his mustache quivering with quiet intensity. "The locked room, mon ami, it is not the heart of this crime, but its frame. The how, it is secondary to the why. We must listen to what this room tells us." He pushed open the conservatory door, now unlocked by the constable, and stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking on the tiled floor. The conservatory was as they had first seen it, a lush sanctuary of ferns, orchids, and a towering palm, their leaves casting intricate shadows in the lamplight. The grand piano dominated the center, its ebony surface still bearing the faint outline where Sir Reginald's body had slumped. The shattered teacup lay in a corner, its fragments gathered but not removed, and the music stand stood empty, a mute testament to the missing score. Poirot's gaze swept the room, methodical and unhurried, as if the very air might yield a secret. He approached the door first, examining the bolt, a simple, sturdy mechanism, its brass gleaming faintly. "No scratches, no signs of force," he murmured, running a gloved finger along the lock. "The key, it was found inside, in the door, oui?" Hastings nodded, consulting his notebook. "Yes, the constable said it was still in the lock. Turned to secure it. No one could have entered without breaking it." Poirot's smile was faint. "And yet someone did. Or perhaps—" He trailed off, moving to the windows. Each was sealed, their latches rusted from disuse, the glass unmarred by cracks or tampering. He tapped one pane, the sound sharp in the quiet. "No entry here, Hastings. The conservatory, it is a fortress, yet a fortress breached." He turned to the piano, his fingers brushing the keys, producing a soft, mournful note. "Sir Reginald, he sat here composing, drinking his tea. The cup, it held cyanide mixed with a sugary syrup he did not favor." "Why syrup, Hastings? Why not a simpler poison?" Hastings frowned, scratching his chin. "To mask the taste, perhaps? Cyanide's bitter, isn't it?" "Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes alight. "But Sir Reginald, he took his tea plain. The syrup, it suggests knowledge of his habits and a desire to deceive. He knelt by the teacup fragments now collected in a small evidence bag by the constable. The residue of syrup clung to the shards, its sweetness cloying in the air." Poirot produced a magnifying glass, peering at the fragments. "A fine china, delicate but broken with force. Did it fall, or was it thrown?" Hastings paced, his boots scuffing the tiles. "Thrown? You think Sir Reginald struggled, maybe realized he was poisoned?" Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. The body, it showed no signs of struggle. Doctor, Grayson was clear. The cup, it was broken after, perhaps to distract. But look here." He pointed to a faint scratch on the floor near the piano's legs, a shallow mark in the otherwise pristine tiles. "This, it is not natural. Something heavy was moved and returned." Hastings crouched, squinting at the mark. "The piano? But it's massive. Surely no one could shift it without leaving more traces." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The piano, perhaps, or something else. The room, it speaks of order, but also of disruption. We must find the purpose of this mark. He rose, moving to the ferns that lined the walls, their fronds brushing his coat. Behind one, half hidden in the soil, he spotted a glint of metal. With care, he extracted a small brass key identical to the one found in the door. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, holding it aloft. "A duplicate key, Hastings." Hidden but not well enough, Hastings gaped. "A duplicate?" Then someone could have locked the door after the murder, making it look like suicide. Poirot nodded, slipping the key into his pocket. "Exactement. The locked room, it is a stage set to mislead. The killer entered, poisoned the tea, and left, locking the door with this key. But why hide it here? Why not take it?" He paced, his mind racing. It suggests haste, or perhaps intent, a wish to be discovered but not too soon. They stepped outside, the evening air sharp with the scent of wet earth. Poirot gazed at the conservatory, its glass dome glowing faintly under the rising moon. The room, it is a riddle but not insoluble. The cyanide, the syrup, the key. These are clues to a mind both cunning and desperate. We must consider the suspects anew. Langston with his ink-stained coat, Clara with her cyanide vial, Edmund with his access to this house. Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter. Access, yes, but Edmund's just a boy. Could he manage such a trick? And Clara, she's cold enough, but that key, how would she get it? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The key, mon ami, it could be made from a mold, a simple task for one with opportunity. Clara visited Harrow Hall. Edmund lived here. Even Langston, he was a guest. All had the chance. They returned to Rose Cottage, where Poirot spread his notes on the table, the lamplight casting shadows across the pages. He sketched the conservatory's layout, marking the piano, the door, the scratch, the hidden key. "The crime, it is theatrical," he said, tapping the paper. "The locked room, it is meant to confound, to suggest the impossible." But Hercule Poirot, he does not believe in the impossible. The killer wished to silence Sir Reginald and steal his requiem. Why? To destroy his, legacy, or to claim it? Hastings leaned over the sketch, his brow furrowed. "The requiem, it's the key, isn't it? Whoever took it had to know its value, its power. Clara wanted to outshine it, Langston wanted to conduct it, Edmund wanted to preserve it. But poison? That's personal." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Personal, yes. The syrup, it suggests intimacy, knowledge of Sir Reginald's habits. Someone close or someone who watched closely." As the clock struck 9, Poirot rose, his expression resolute. "Tomorrow, Hastings, we shall confront the suspects with this key. Their reactions, they will tell us much. The locked room, it is no longer a mystery, but a mirror reflecting the killer's intent. We are close, mon ami, to the final notes of this dark symphony." The village slept, its silence broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Poirot stood at the window gazing at the stars, his mind weaving the threads of the case into a pattern only he could see. The locked room had spoken, and its voice, though faint, was growing clearer. Chapter 7. The Ink and the Key. The morning in Saint. Mary's Mead dawned crisp and clear, the October sun burning away the last wisps of mist that clung to the village's rooftops. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes gleaming, stood in the grand hall of Harrow Hall, his small, fastidious figure a stark contrast to the somber portraits lining the walls. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, adjusted his tie nervously, his eyes darting toward the drawing room where the suspects awaited. The discovery of the duplicate key hidden behind a fern in the conservatory had shifted the puzzle of Sir Reginald Harrow's murder. Poisoned by cyanide in a locked room, his phantom requiem stolen into sharper focus. The indigo ink on Maestro Langston's coat, Clara Vane's vial of cyanide, and Edmund Blake's access to the house each pointed to a possible killer. But the key suggested a calculated deception. "Today, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low and precise, "we shall stir the waters and see what rises to the surface." Hastings, clutching his notebook, murmured, "That key, Poirot. It's a game changer." Someone locked the door to make it look like suicide, but who had the chance to make a duplicate? Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes gleaming with anticipation. "The chance, Hastings, and the motive. The key, it is a silent witness. But the ink, the poison, the score, they sing of intent. Let us begin." The drawing room was as they had left it, its heavy curtains drawn back to admit the morning light, the fire crackling softly in the grate. Maestro Victor Langston stood by the window, his silver hair catching the sun, his posture rigid with barely concealed irritation. Clara Vane sat in a high-backed chair, her dark hair pulled tightly back, her gray eyes cold and watchful. Edmund Blake, pale and hunched, perched on a sofa, his hands twisting in his lap. Mrs. Agnes Poole, the housekeeper, hovered near the door, her face etched with quiet strain, while Thomas Reed, the groundskeeper, stood impassively, his weathered hands clasped. Poirot stepped to the center of the room, his presence commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his Belgian accent lending a musical cadence to his words, "the death of Sir Reginald Harrow is no longer a mystery of impossibility. The locked conservatory, it was a stage set to deceive, but Hercule Poirot, he is not deceived." He produced the small brass key from his pocket, holding it aloft so it glinted in the light. This, a duplicate key, was found hidden in the conservatory. With it, the killer entered, poisoned Sir Reginald's tea, stole his requiem, and locked the door, creating the illusion of suicide. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Langston's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. Clara's lips parted, her composure faltering for a fraction of a second. Edmund's hands stilled, his face paling further if that were possible. Mrs. Poole clutched her apron and Reed's steady gaze flickered briefly. Hastings, watching closely, whispered, "Look at them, Poirot. Guilty consciences, all of them." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Consciences, perhaps, but guilt? We shall see." He turned to Langston first, his voice deceptively mild. "Monsieur Langston, your coat bore the indigo ink of Sir Reginald's manuscript, a stain you claim came from a visit days prior. Yet you were in St. Mary's Mead on the night of the murder, arriving late at the Red Lion. Tell me, did you use this key to enter the conservatory?" Langston's face flushed crimson, his hands clenching into fists. "This is outrageous. I told you I knocked on the conservatory door, but Reginald didn't answer. I went to the inn. Ask Cobb. I've never seen that key." His voice boomed, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in his fingers, the way his eyes avoided the key. "Curious, monsieur," Poirot said, stepping closer. "The ink, it suggests proximity to the score. And the train ticket stub in your bag places you here at the critical hour. If not the key, then what brought you to Harrow Hall?" Langston sputtered, "I wanted to settle our dispute about the Requiem's tempo." But he was asleep, or so I thought. "I left, I swear it." Poirot turned to Clara, his gaze piercing. Madame Vane, your knowledge of cyanide is most convenient. A vial in your darkroom labeled for photography yet capable of murder. And your visit to Harrow Hall a week ago, did you perhaps take a mold of the conservatory key? Clara's laugh was sharp, like the snap of a twig. A mold? You credit me with too much cunning, Monsieur Poirot. I argued with Reginald, yes, but I left him alive. As for cyanide, it's a tool of my trade. Nothing more. Poirot held up the key again, watching her closely. And the requiem, madam. It's theft. It clears the stage for your ode to solitude. Did you not wish to eclipse Sir Reginald's star? Clara's eyes flashed, but her voice remained steady. I eclipse no one. My work stands on its own. If I wanted his score, I'd have written a better one, not stolen his. Edmund, trembling, spoke before Poirot could address him. I didn't do it. I loved Sir Reginald. That key, I've never seen it. I was at the pub, you know that. His voice cracked and he buried his face in his hands. Poirot's expression softened, but his eyes were relentless. Monsieur Blake, you had access to this house, to Sir Reginald's keys. The letter we found, it spoke of a changed will, one that diminished your inheritance. Did this drive you to desperation? Edmund shook his head frantically. No, I didn't care about the money. He was my teacher, my family. Mrs. Poole stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. Master Edmund's telling the truth, sir. He was devoted to Sir Reginald, even after the talk of the will. Poirot nodded. But his mind catalogued the boy's agitation, the way his eyes darted to the key. He turned to the housekeeper and groundskeeper, his tone measured. Madame Poole, Monsieur Reed, you both move freely about Harrow Hall. A key could be copied, hidden by one who knows the house well. Did you see anyone near the conservatory that night? Mrs. Poole shook her head. I was in my quarters, sir, after supper. Saw nothing. Reed's voice was gruff. I was in my shed, sharpening tools. The conservatory lights were on, but I didn't go near. Poirot paced slowly, the key still in his hand. The ink, the key, the poison. These are the notes of a dark melody. The killer knew Sir Reginald's habits, his tea, his score. They entered with this key, poisoned him with cyanide masked by syrup, took the requiem and locked the door to deceive. But why? To destroy his legacy or to claim it? Fame, revenge, inheritance. Each of you has a shadow of motive. The room was silent, the tension palpable. Langston's face was taut with anger. Clara's eyes burned with defiance, and Edmund's shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. Poirot stopped pacing, his voice rising slightly. I ask you to consider, mes amis, what you know, what you hide. The truth, it cannot be silenced forever. Hercule Poirot will find it and it will sing. As the suspects dispersed, Langston storming out, Clara gliding with icy grace, and Edmund stumbling tearfully, Hastings whispered, That key shook them, Poirot. But who made it? And why hide it in the conservatory? Poirot slipped the key into his pocket, his expression thoughtful. The hiding, mon ami, it suggests a plan interrupted or a taunt. The killer wished the key to be found, but not too soon. We must now search their worlds. Langston's orchestra, Clara's cottage, Edmund's room for the final piece of this puzzle. They stepped into the hall, the portraits of Harrow, ancestors staring down like silent judges. The sun climbed higher, but the air remained heavy with the weight of secrets. Poirot paused, his gaze distant. The requiem, Hastings, It is the heart of this crime. Its theft was no afterthought. It was the purpose. And the one who took it, they are close. Very close. Chapter 8. The Phantom's Motive. The Church Hall of Saint. Mary's Mead stood at the heart of the village, its stone walls weathered by time, its stained glass windows casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the wooden floor. On this crisp October afternoon, the hall was filled with an uneasy assembly. Villagers, curious and somber, gathered to hear Hercule Poirot unravel the mystery of Sir Reginald Harrow's murder. The composer's death, poisoned by cyanide in a locked conservatory, his phantom requiem stolen, had cast a shadow over the village, and the discovery of a duplicate key had tightened the net around the suspects. Poirot, his small frame impeccable in a tailored suit, stood at the front of the hall, his mustache perfectly waxed, his green eyes alight with the clarity of a mind that had pieced together the final notes of this dark symphony. Captain Hastings, seated in the front row, clutched his notebook, his face a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The suspects were seated before Poirot, their expressions a study in contrast. Maestro Victor Langston, his silver hair gleaming, sat with arms crossed, his jaw set in defiance. Clara Vane, her dark hair severe, fixed Poirot with a cold, unyielding stare, and young Edmund Blake, pale and trembling, seemed to shrink into his chair, his eyes red from unshed tears. The housekeeper, Mrs. Agnes Poole, and groundskeeper Thomas Reed sat among the villagers, their faces unreadable. The air was thick with expectation, the murmur of the crowd falling silent as Poirot raised a hand. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and precise, carrying the faint lilt of his Belgian heritage. "We are gathered to resolve a tragedy, the murder of Sir Reginald Harrow, a man of genius poisoned in his locked conservatory, his masterpiece, the Phantom Requiem, stolen. The locked room, the cyanide, the missing score, these were designed to confound, to suggest the impossible. But Hercule Poirot does not believe in the impossible. The truth, it has been found, and it will now be heard." Hastings leaned forward, whispering to the vicar beside him. "He's got that look, Reverend. He knows who did it." The vicar nodded, his eyes fixed on Poirot, who paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Poirot began with the scene of the crime. Sir Reginald was found at his piano, a single sheet of his requiem in his hand, the rest gone. The door was locked, the key inside, the windows sealed. A shattered teacup, laced with cyanide and a sugary syrup, lay nearby. At first it seemed a suicide, but the little gray cells, they protested. A duplicate key hidden behind a fern revealed the truth. The killer entered, poisoned the tea, stole the score, and locked the door to deceive. He turned to the suspects, his gaze sweeping over them. 3 stood to gain from Sir Reginald's death. Maestro Langston, whose ambition clashed with Sir Reginald's vision. Madame Vane, whose rivalry burned with envy. And Monsieur Blake, whose inheritance was threatened by a changed will. Each had opportunity, each had motive. But only one had the cunning to orchestrate this crime. Langston shifted, his voice sharp. "This is nonsense, Poirot. I was in London, and even if I returned, I had no key." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Patience, monsieur. Let us first consider the evidence." He produced the train ticket stub from Langston's bag, holding it aloft. "You were in St. Mary's Mead on Monday night, arriving at the Red Lion near 11. Your coat bore the indigo ink of Sir Reginald's manuscript, a stain you claimed came from an earlier visit. But the ink, it was fresh, not faded, suggesting you handled the score that night. Langston's face reddened, but Poirot continued, turning to Clara. Madame Vane, your hatred for Sir Reginald was no secret. Your career, once brilliant, had waned, and his requiem threatened to eclipse you forever. In your cottage, we found a vial of cyanide labeled for photography yet capable of murder, and your alibi, alone composing, could not be verified. A sheet of music in a style not unlike Sir Reginald's hinted at your desire to rival his work. Clara's lips curled into a sneer. You accuse me of theft? Of murder? I create, Monsieur Poirot, not destroy. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot's smile was faint. Creation, madame, can be born of destruction. We shall see. He turned to Edmund, whose hands trembled. Monsieur Blake, your devotion to Sir Reginald was profound, yet a letter revealed his plan to fund a music school, diminishing your inheritance. You had access to Harrow Hall, to its keys, and your alibi at the Red Lion, though confirmed, showed you anxious, checking your watch. Did you fear what Sir Reginald planned? Edmund's voice broke. I loved him. I'd never heard him. The score, it was his soul. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. Oui, monsieur, I believe your love. But love, it can blind as well as bind, Poirot paced, his voice rising with conviction. The crime was meticulous, cyanide in syrup, a duplicate key, a stolen score. The killer knew Sir Reginald's habits. His tea taken plain, yet laced with syrup to mask the poison's taste. They entered with the key, poured the poison, took the requiem, and locked the door, hiding the key to delay discovery. But why the score? To destroy it or to claim it? He stopped, facing Clara. Madame Vane, you are the key to this symphony. A week ago you visited Harrow Hall under the guise of reconciliation. You argued with Sir Reginald, but you also observed his tea, his habits, his keys. You made a mold of the conservatory key, a simple task for one with access. On Monday night you returned, entering silently. You brought a syrup laced with cyanide, knowing Sir Reginald would drink it, trusting its sweetness. You poisoned him, took the requiem, and locked the door with the duplicate key, hiding it in haste behind the fern. Clara's face paled, her hands gripping the chair. You have no proof. This is fantasy. Poirot held up a hand, his voice unrelenting. The proof, madame, it was found this morning. In your cottage, hidden in a locked drawer, was a manuscript, the Phantom Requiem, in Sir Reginald's hand, but with your annotations, as if to claim it as your own. The grocer confirmed you bought tea and syrup on Monday, and the barmaid saw your agitation that evening. You sought to steal his legacy, to pass his work as yours, to reclaim your fading glory. The hall was silent, the villagers' eyes wide. Clara rose, her voice shaking. I wanted to study it, to understand his genius. I didn't mean to kill him. But her defiance crumbled, and she sank back, tears streaming down her face. He mocked me, said I'd never match him. I brought the syrup, yes, to talk, to soften him. But the cyanide, it was a moment of madness. I took the score, thinking I could make it mine. Poirot's expression was grave. Madness, madame, or ambition. You poisoned a man, stole his soul's work, and staged a locked room to deceive. But the truth, it cannot be silenced. The constable stepped forward, gently escorting Clara from the hall as the villagers murmured in shock. Hastings, his face pale, whispered, "Good Lord, Poirot, you had her from the start. The key, the syrup, it all fits." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. "The Requiem, Hastings, it was her undoing. She could not resist its brilliance, and in her envy, she destroyed herself." As the crowd dispersed, the church bell tolled, its mournful note echoing over the village. Poirot and Hastings stepped into the evening, the stars bright above Saint Mary's Mead. "The music, mon ami," Poirot said softly. "It lives on, but Sir Reginald's song is silent. We have found justice, but the Requiem, it will never sing." With a final glance at the hall, Poirot walked on, his mind already turning to the next mystery, the next melody of truth waiting to be heard.